2 Samuel.
2 Samuel chapter 6. The focus is on Michael. But we're going to go ahead and look at the whole chapter to kind of get a little bit of backstory. It's not extremely long, so I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then so we'll go ahead and jump into it. 2 Samuel 6. Then David again gathered all the elite troops of Israel, and 30,000 in all. He led them to Baalah of Judah to bring back the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They placed the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from Abinadab's house, which was on a hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, were guiding the cart as it left the house, carrying the ark of God. Ahio walked in front of the ark. David and all the people of Israel were celebrating before the Lord, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, castanets, and cymbals. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Michal, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand and steadied the ark of God. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him dead because of this. So Uzzah died right there beside the ark of God. David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. David was now afraid of the Lord, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of the Lord back into my care?" So David decided not to move the ark of the Lord into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of the Lord remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. It says, moving the ark to Jerusalem. Then King David was told, "The Lord has blessed Obed-Edom's household and everything he has because of the ark of God." So David went there and brought the ark of the God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with a great celebration. After the men who were carrying the ark of the Lord had gone 6 steps, David sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. And David danced before the Lord with all his might, wearing a priestly garment. So David and all the people of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts of joy and the blowing of ram's horns. But as the ark of the Lord entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she was filled with contempt for him. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the special tent David had prepared for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings to the Lord. When he had finished his sacrifices, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies. Then he gave to every Israelite man and woman in the crowd a loaf of bread and a cake of dates and a cake of raisins. Then all the people returned to their homes. When David returned home to bless his own family, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. She said in disgust, "How distinguished the king of Israel looked today, shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might do." David retorted to Michal, "I was dancing before the Lord. He chose me above your father and all his family. He appointed me as the leader of Israel, the people of the Lord. So I celebrate before the Lord. Yes, and I am willing to look even more foolish than this, even to be humiliated in my own eyes. Those servant girls you mentioned will indeed think I am distinguished." So Michal, the daughter of Saul, remained childless throughout her entire life. Who in this story, just instant, can you identify with the best?
Well, a little bit of David and also Michal. You know, I mean, when I feel that I did something well for the Lord, I do rejoice. I do get happy. I do feel real good. My heart's content. But then on the flip side, you know, if I'm in the assembly and somebody's not singing, I flow into maybe judgment. So, you know, we should be singing to the Lord right now, you know. But that's not my place, but that's kind of like with Micah, you know. She didn't know the situation. She was judging David right off the bat of what he was doing.
Nowhere I looked, and it made me like when I was reading this, made me think about, I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen the movie Aladdin, where he's coming into the town as Prince Ali Baba, but this is his grand entrance, and it's elephants and it's trumpets and it's all these people dancing, and that's how I kind of pictured David coming in to Jerusalem with the Ark of the Covenant, and this big old grand entrance, because okay, we're finally moving it there. Obed-Edom's house was being extremely blessed. Everything he did, everything he touched, he had the Ark of the Covenant there at his house. So David said, all right, it's time we got to get this thing to Jerusalem. We got to bless the city. So, I mean, even Uzzah getting killed, I was like, man, he didn't even do anything wrong. He caught it. It was falling and he caught it, and it aroused the Lord's anger. And I was just like, man, you know, to myself, I'm going to say it out loud, but I was like, man, it's not fair. Like, he was just trying to keep it from falling, and he gets struck down. I don't think Uzzah did anything wrong, but I'm not God. So
the ark was holy.
The ark was holy. I guess. Yeah, that's the point there.
It just sounds like David didn't do it the right way the first time, because that shouldn't have happened if it was done the proper way. It doesn't sound like it, because even David got angry, but I think the second time he did it the right way.
Yeah, offering sacrifices every 6 steps.
Yeah.
You take 6 steps and stop. It's probably a long ways. Probably a lot of cows who died on that trip. It says, was David's rejoicing genuine or a show?
I thought it was a show.
She did. So
That makes you got jealous.
I think she was. That's what the real, to me, that's what really stood out to me. The way Dewey had kind of laid out the outline was more of from a judgmental standpoint, and I've seen it even in our own church, of maybe somebody's what you call overzealous, or whether it's raising hands, or they're doing too much, or in our eyes, but they're praising God, you know. And David came in and he was excited. He was this is how I'm going to worship God this way, and he was going all out. So I think that's something to look at as well. I called Sean Gary because I was just kind of like, not at a loss, but it didn't make sense why or what. And he said that we were talking about it. He said different versions will say, well, he was wearing priestly garments. Well, to that's fully clothed, you know. So if it was like he wasn't a priest, he was a king, so he wasn't wearing the right clothes. So if that's the reason she got upset, or if because he came in half dressed, really there's not really like a clear just this is what it is, this is what. So it's pretty interesting conversation. We probably talked for way too long about it, but
No, you're right though. I mean, like with Michael, I mean, she looked at being a queen a certain way, just like Saul. I mean, they dressed the part, and to her, it's like, well, you meant you took some garment off. I mean, she was looking at that part. She was looking at the physical of how he was acting, you know, instead of the spiritual part, you know. So, I mean, that's what I thought about that too. Is, you know, how much do they have on? You know, I mean, they have a robe after another robe after another, and something, you know, garment, you know, that they put on first. But that's where I see that it was like this is the way we do stuff as a king and a queen, and you can't go beyond that. You know, when he talks about the servants and stuff like that, you know, belittling them even, of saying, you know, they're your servants, you know, they're, you know, but I just see that that's what she was looking at, you know. Yeah, jealousy was there, but there's a certain way that we carry ourselves. And she was the king's daughter now. That's kind of wild too, how he says it. He's where we're reading and where it says Saul's daughter. Saul's daughter. It's never David's wife. You know, it's always Saul's daughter. That's, again, I wouldn't, you know, introduce my wife as, you know, her dad's name's daughter all the time. My wife.
And you got to think, I mean, Saul tried to kill David on multiple accounts, you know. So
Jealous. He was jealous.
she was raised watching her dad try to kill this guy. And then he ends up marrying her. So, I mean, she's still got to have something there. I mean, we have a great influence on our kids. I mean, and I see it with my kids, and I'm starting to realize it more that, man, they watch. They're watching what you're doing and how you're acting and how you treat people and how. So she was definitely influenced. I mean, her resentment. But I like what Josie had said about her jealousy. I mean, if I came in here with some of the versions talk about he was half dressed and he was flipping and everything else, going through the streets and doing backflips. I mean, imagine some things were exposed. I mean, so she would have been, hey man, that's my husband. What's he doing down there? Showing off everything to all these servant girls. There's also it's a hymn, or it's in, I believe it's in Samuel as well, where the servants were singing David slain thousands. I mean, Saul slain thousands, and David had slain tens of thousands, and there was already jealousy there. For, you know, they were singing songs of David's better than your dad, and that's said. She was introduced as, well, this is Saul's daughter, this is David's wife, and nowhere does it even. I mean, it doesn't even reference her anywhere through this whole chapter of, man, that's his wife, or that's, you know, when he goes. He says, when David returned home to bless his own family, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. She said in disgust, how distinguished the king of Israel looked today. A little sarcasm there. Shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might do.
A little R-rated.
Yeah, that's the way she took it. A little too much. She was a little upset about it.
Well, that's because also because he was a king, and they were put on a higher step because they were king. So she was going to see him just as a common man. That's what she saw him as a common man. He was not portraying his position as being a king. And that's why I think part of it too, that she looked at him, put down on her. He didn't honor her husband in that sense. It's like what she says, and like any servant, like any vulgar fellow will do, she puts him down. Instead of lifting her husband, she puts him down.
David and I were talking about this, and it's like King David. So his wife had to know that he loved his Lord, loved his God. He loved him, you know. And nowhere does she even say anything about God at all. You know what exactly. She knew why he was celebrating, but her mind was not God. You know, a godly woman would have been down there dancing with her husband, you know, rejoicing. You know, the ark was finally there, you know.
Never does it ever mention that she had a love for God, ever. I mean, I searched, and there's not any mention of Michal's relationship with God. She was more of a, let's say, like an infatuation with David, and maybe it was the position, or maybe it was, you know, apparently he was a good-looking guy. So
you have to remember that Saul was going to give her their first daughter, and then but Michal loves David, and she helped him escape from Saul several times.
Yeah.
But then again, she was taken away from David and given to another man, by Saul. So in other words, also you can see that maybe she lost her love for David in a sense.
But Saul was using his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Saul was using his daughter to kill him.
Yeah.
With the Philistines, you know. So
there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's part of it. It's a soap opera.
Sounds like Leah and Rachel.
Yeah.
You have to, well, you can come, but you still gotta work 7 years.
10 more years.
Yeah, exactly.
No, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives, and that's why I think the question that hit me, that first one, is what stuck out to you in this story, and then who can you identify with? I was excited about us. I know we had, like I said, we're more focused on the judgmental side and the jealousy of Michael, and how, I mean, I know I've been guilty of that in times, you know, like, man, why, or whether it's like somebody's worship, or man, are they doing too much, or I don't know if y'all have ever, I mean, I'm not endorsing, but we've gone to deeper worship. The Church on the Rock does it one Wednesday a month, and there's a lot of raising hands and people, you know, crying out, and it's interesting. I mean, it really is, and I'm not by any means saying that's anything good or bad, but to judge somebody, I mean, we have to be extremely careful to judge somebody else's worship, because they're praising God. At the end of the day, they're praising God. So who are you to say, oh, that's not the right way to do it, or you went a little overboard that time. You're praising the Creator of the universe, but maybe you're a little too excited about it, or you were putting on a show.
Let me ask you, do they use instrument music?
No, not.
Okay.
No.
A lot of it is the music.
Yeah.
The fervor.
Yeah, the emotion
So
of,
sometimes it's not coming from the heart. It's just coming the physical, what you feel.
Yeah.
So that's why you have to be careful. If it's coming from the heart, it's genuine. It's kind of like David. You know, everybody's got to praise God with your heart.
Yeah.
So
The scripture that we have up here, Matthew 7:1, do not judge, or you will be judged. I mean, that's what, you know, we have to remember. You know, that other story about taking a plank out of your eye, or you take a speck out of your brother's eye, again, falls into, you know, like that.
and I thought that was interesting how he had started out, and I'll go over that with you guys. He had just said, it's Matthew 7:1. It says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Because our culture is big on tolerance. At least it gives a lot of lip service to it. We have become tolerant of anything and everything, believing each person is uniquely shaped, physically, emotionally, relationally, intellectually, spiritually, and must be given the freedom to pursue whatever will make him or her happy and self-fulfilled. Even Christians have often embraced a tolerance based on judge not, lest you also be judged, finding it very difficult to take stands on right and wrong, truth and falsehood, morality and immorality. It's the old live and let live, as long as your choices don't infringe on the life choices of others. Look more closely at Matthew 7:1, after Jesus says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. He goes on to say in verses 3-5, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye? Then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. In verse 6, do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. In verses 15-20, watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. It says each of these requires some type of judgment about others, does it not? What is the improper judgment we are to avoid, while at the same time making godly judgments that lead to proper action? How can we make sure we judge with right judgment? John 7:24. It says the bad guy in this study is actually a bad gal, a woman who made a harsh judgment and suffered the consequences of her attitude. So what can we learn from her that will help us make spirit-led judgments that glorify God and resist making ungodly judgments that will cost us dearly? There's definitely, you know, you go. It's interesting when I was reading that as well, because we have to make discernment. I mean, and a lot of times, you know, I'll talk to my brother. Will call me almost every night, and I tell him about advice on his restaurants. My older brother, and I tell him consulting closes at 10 p.m. I gotta go to bed. He said, don't call me after 10 unless if something's real serious. Don't call me after 10. But I always tell him, almost every time, have you prayed about it? Have you asked God? Have you said, hey, show me what to do? Because you're asking me, I'm going to give you my worldly answer of what I think's right. I said, it may or may not be right. I said, but you need to take that. He has a situation where one of his cooks relapsed and he didn't know, hey, should I give this guy another chance? So how many chances has God given you? How many times have people given you a second chance when you went and did something wrong? I said, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you whether to give this guy's job back or not. I'm just telling you, look at what has been done for you and go take that to God, because that's not something that I can't give you the answer to that. I don't know. I mean, I can tell you what I think, but I can also tell you the best advice I know. What's the Bible say about it? What, say, give it to God. Ask God to give you guidance on something like that. And I think if we took that mentality for everything in our life, I know when I do, I'm in a lot better shape than when I'm like, oh, I got this, God. This is under control. Everything's good. It usually ends up real bad when I try to take everything into my own hands. So why do you think Michal reacted to David's exuberant celebration as she did? What do you think caused her to act the way she did when David's coming in, flipping, and with all these instruments and singing and dancing and
She thought her king would act that way.
yeah.
She despised the way he did it in her heart. I feel like she just thought a king should be sitting on his throne and watching.
With his royal garments.
But my thought is sometimes it may not be that what she was thinking is that he was a king, but that I respected back to her, and she felt disrespected by the way he was doing. That was just her personal feeling of seeing things going on, that you're acting that way, and that's just making me look bad.
Yeah. Has anyone ever felt that way? Probably hard to answer sitting next to your spouse. My wife is here. She's not here though. It says, what got in the way of her joining him and instead led her to criticize him?
Well, I mean, when you start thinking about judging, I mean, judging is so much ways of judging somebody. Their look. You judge people with your emotions. You judge people with relationships, thinking you're smarter than them or you're more spiritual than them. I mean, so there's so many different ways of reacting to it, and what you were just saying just a few minutes ago about your brother, she didn't give it to God. She didn't say, hey, God, how should I handle this, man? Look at my husband, he's embarrassing me, But instead, she reacted, and what you say, oh yeah, you were, out there throwing your clothes off and showing off, and so again, I mean, it's when I was reading this and judgmental that I can be, that's my idea, at work is, when you got to get something done, big task, I realize that, 4 or 5 minds are better than one. Open it up, let's hear what others have to say, But I think what you said, I think is so good as far as did you pray about it? That is so strong. But we do. I mean, everybody does. They judge. Cars. Look at this car. Everything. And Michal, she's same thing. There's no, like you said, there's no word that she said anything about God. Anything. And then the guy that got killed, God's got rules. He's got commands for us, and he's right there. He's telling us, before you even start judging, really think about it. Pull yourself back. He said, how many chances, have God given you? That was good. That was really good.
What do you think on the last verse?
Her punishment. Just trying to skip over that one, David. No, it's important. I mean, she remained childless. That was her punishment for passing judgment. In that one moment, that's what I mean. It's tied directly to it. So Michal, the daughter of Saul, remained childless throughout her entire life. She was never able to have kids because of this one moment that she had. I mean, Uzzah caught the ark, he got killed. She passes judgment. David's making this grand entrance. He's excited. We brought the ark back to where it's supposed to be, to Jerusalem. And I don't know if it ever could have been different, if her heart, could have been softened, or if she would have turned to God at any point. But she didn't. She never did.
Well, they had their own gods though too, right?
They had all kinds of idols.
See,
All kinds they had. But she knew. I mean, she knew. I mean, being around David and being around Saul, and she knew God. But yeah, no, there's a lot of other things going on. So this whole soap opera. We just have a little bit of time to kind of just talk about. I mean, in the main thing. I mean, she was punished. She was punished for her actions and for her judgment that she passed on David, and it's hard to. There's a difference between being judgmental and passing judgment, and I think that's something that we have to discern through as well, because there's making right judgments and being judgmental. I mean, because you can judge somebody based on their clothes. Oh, it's terrible. Where I work, I mean, I'm in sales. We see everybody come up and they're like, some of my coworkers are like, oh, they got an old beat up car and they're not going to get approved for credit. And I see it every day. I'm like, man, don't do that. Like, you never know who's just humbly, this guy's probably might have $1 million. I mean, but I see it all the time, instantly. And we see people and we pass, and I'm guilty of it. See somebody and I pass instant judgment before I even know them. I know anything about them, know about their story, about their relationship with God, or about whatever it is. Instantly, we pass judgment. It takes like maybe 2 seconds to determine you have this preconceived idea about this person.
That's what the dude has on here, John 7:20-24. It says, do not judge by appearance, but judge by right judgment. It's exactly what they think that person did. I look at the card, instantly. Wow.
Wednesday, we were sitting, me and John came to the funeral that they had here for Cohen. And we got there probably, I think it started at 10, and we got there like 2 minutes till 10 or something. We sat at the very back seat. And actually, where we sat, we weren't supposed to sit there because we were supposed to skip a few, but kind of embarrassed to go up there in front. People were already sitting there. Anyway, we sat in the very back seat. Unfortunately, there was a couple of ladies in front of us, and they weren't young ladies. But it was, I was so frustrated because everybody that walked in, they made a comment about it. And I'm like, God, and I thought I was the only one catching this, and I told John, John said, that was a nice wedding. And yeah, I like that. And he said, I just couldn't get over the 2 ladies that were, I mean, he saw it too. I mean, everybody that walked in, I mean, after I did, there wasn't that many because I was, like I said, we were almost late. And it was funny how they would laugh about this one person or talk about this one. And I'm like, I really wanted to go and say, hey, keep it down or step out or something. But it was embarrassing. But back to this young lady here. I almost see it kind of, and I hope I'm not stepping out of line, how most women would act. If you're over there, you're all excited about something that's going on in your life. God has blessed you, and you're halfway naked or whatever, and you're dancing in front of a bunch of young ladies. Your wife is looking. What is she doing?
I had that thought. If I came in here half dressed,
Yeah.
doing backflips,
Yeah.
how would my wife feel?
But how would she feel, you know? And the thing is that, is it David? That David was doing something right in his eyes. But what we see and what it's where we draw our conclusions. Right here it says it kind of funny. It says, "You were really great today," she said. "You acted like a 30-year-old man dancing around half naked in front of your servant slaves." That's what she saw, but she didn't see the whole picture, he was really all excited because, you know, whatever God did in his life at that particular time, he was worshiping God, and he was all excited about that. But we also have to be careful because, as you said earlier, your children are watching. Not only your children, everybody else is watching. You know, so how we act and what we do. I mean, we can't walk around, you know, on thin ice or whatever all our life, but we also have to be careful. I mean, if you was to walk in here half naked glorifying God, I think we're going to tell Henry, "Hey, your little people here, he done went crazy. We need to throw him out." You know what I mean? I mean that. Yeah, but then what would your wife think? Well, my husband done went crazy. You know what I mean? But it's kind of a normal reaction. So, wow, for her to be punished by not having any children, you know, or whatever, to me that was kind of hard. But you know, God knows what He does, and you know. And,
David told her, "Well, you know what? I mean, God chose me over your dad, and
Yeah.
your whole line. You know, I mean, he was letting them know that."
that was a bit. I struggle with that one a little bit, you know. But I wouldn't dare walk in here. You know, I mean, I couldn't flip around anyway. You know, I'd fall in. But you know, doing something like that, you know, and then Josie would have thought the same thing. 30-year-old man thinking, you know, chocante, or the word we use, you know, whatever that translates to English.
But did David do crazy things like that? As far as
He a man after God's heart. I mean, he did a lot of things and that's why we have to really be careful not to be judgmental of somebody else's worship. I mean, that's what really her consequence came from, was being judgmental, and I guess trying to find ways to either join in or to encourage or to not pass judgment on, hey man, this person's praising God. I mean, yes, have discernment about, you know, Santi, please don't come in here next week half naked.
No.
But you know, Cyrus, it would depend on how you know your husband. If, like, she knew that David would act, you know, certain ways at certain times that was just out there. Like with Henry, if he was doing something that like, oh, that's him, you know, I know him. I know him. He is outgoing. He's always talking to people. It doesn't matter. But I don't pass judgment because I already know how he is.
Yeah.
But if it was something totally out of his character, all of a sudden that would surprise me. Yeah, I would be like, what's wrong? You know, why are you doing that? But the more you know your spouse, the more you can back them up and defend them.
Thank you guys for thoughts and comments and being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.